Hey guys, new episode. Today I have this monstrosity with me. This is the Rotel Michi X3 Series 2. This is shipping out to a client of mine in Chennai, and he was gracious enough to allow me to do an unboxing as well as to put it through its paces over the last few days. As always, before I get into talking about the actual product and my thoughts on it, let me give you a brief rundown about Rotel as a brand. They're founded in Japan in 1961 by an engineer named Tomoki Tachikawa. He's focused on building hi-fi components that have clean circuit design, minimal signal path, and high-grade components. The term Rotel comes from Roland and Emotel, which were a couple of hi-fi lines that Tachikawa worked on prior to beginning Rotel. Rotel in its heyday, rather its initial days, worked on the assembly of televisions and radios, but eventually began specializing in hi-fi components only. In 1979, they formalized the balanced design concept. This is a philosophy that governs the manufacturing of all Rotel products, focusing on musical integrity, reliability, and honest specifications. Something that separates Rotel from most of its peers in the high-end audio space is that they're still family-owned. This is fairly unusual in a world dominated by things like private equity. It's currently owned by Tachikawa's great-grandnephew, a gentleman named Mr. Peter Cow. In terms of R&D, they've got a couple of offices in the UK and Japan, while most of their manufacturing takes place in China. Before I get into talking about the actual Michi series, let me give you a brief rundown about the products that really put Rotel on the map. We have the RX402, which was a AM/FM receiver, or in today's lingo, just a stereo amplifier. This was their first sort of major success. This is followed by the RA820BX, which was a cult favorite in the UK, again a stereo amp, and then the RB980BX. This was a high current power amp that did really well for Rotel as well. Early 1990s is when the Michi line originally launches. This is a reference grade line with components hand-built for serious audiophiles. This includes the RHQ10 and the RHC10, which were a phono as well as a general preamp, known for their ultra low noise floor as well as great sort of elegance of design. 2019 is when Rotel decided to revive the brand for the modern day high-end sort of user in the form of the X3 and X5, which are all-in-one units like the one you see here, along with the P5 and S5, which were dedicated power and pre-sections for those who needed a little extra. Once again, high-end flagship internals, gorgeous industrial design, very much embodying the balanced design concept ethos that we spoke about earlier. This appealed to both the legacy Rotel user as well as the new modern day generation listener. 2023, Rotel launches the X3 Series 2, which is a revamped X3 obviously. Once again features a ton of power, a great DAC chip, high-end moving magnet phono stage, as well as a high-end headphone amplifier, all in a single chassis. So here's a brief rundown on the technical specifications. On the amplification and power front, we're looking at 200 watts worth of power per channel into 8 ohms, 350 watts per channel at 4 ohms, so a ton of power at your disposal. It features a class AB topology with a custom oversized toroidal transformer, independent power supplies for both the digital and analog section. The digital section features an ESS Sabre ES9028 Pro 8-channel DAC with PCM decoding up to 32-bit 384 kHz and DS decoding up to DST256, and support for MQA and MQA Studio decoding via USB-B, along with Bluetooth that supports aptX HD and AAC. It's got 3 RCA inputs, a single balanced XLR input, a single moving magnet phono stage, 3 optical inputs, 3 coaxial inputs, a single USB-B input to pair up with a PC. On the output front, you're looking at dual speaker terminal with AB as well as bi-wiring capacity. It's got a preamp output by RCA if you need to hook up a power amp. It's got dual subwoofer outputs. It's got a 6.35mm front headphone output. It's got a gorgeous front panel display and a very impressive high quality remote. On the performance front, it's got a THD, or a total harmonic distortion, of 0.008%, a signal to noise ratio of 102 dB on the line front and 80 dB at the phono, a dampening factor of 350, and a frequency response of 10 Hz to 100 kilohertz plus or minus 0.05 dB. So here are my real world thoughts about the performance. Didn't have a ton of time to spend with it, spent close to 3 days. Paired these up with my fine 502 SPs at home. I'll go through the sort of the major subcategories of the amp. We'll start off with the visual aspects. A brilliant sort of industrial design, very Rotel-y in that sense. Sturdy, well-built chassis. This thing weighs 30 kilos, so it's definitely going to be well built. If you were to look up pictures of what the internals look like, it's got a brilliant layout, clearly a lot of thought put into it, potentially over-engineered, but again in the best way possible. On the sonic front, this has that Rotel sound, that clear, sort of untarnished, very natural sound. Works brilliantly with sort of brilliant speakers. In my case, I really like the fine 502 SPs. I have them paired at home with the Marantz 40N, which is no slouch of an amp, but this clearly blew that out of the water. Provides a great amount of high quality bass, you know, lots of articulation on the mid-range and smooth treble. So even at high volumes, by virtue of having so much power at tap, the amp does not struggle. So that's something that's really good for guys like me who tend to sort of crank volume, especially when listening to hard rock and things like that. On the digital front, it's got that ESS 9028 chip that we talked about earlier. It's a great chip for the price, works well with the tonality that the amp provides. However, does lack a little bit of detail, a little bit of that analyticalness, if you will. If your primary consumption of music is going to be through digital, you're likely going to want to consider investing in a dedicated DAC somewhere down the line. But for the vast majority of casual sort of digital consumers, I think the onboard DAC should be more than adequate. Similar feedback on the phono stage. It's got a moving magnet phono stage that does really well. I think lots of sort of dynamicism in the sound. Should work again really well for the average vinyl listener, the casual listener. However, again, if you've got a high-end turntable, primary consumption happens to be via vinyl, you're likely going to want to involve a higher end phono stage to really see what this amp's capable of. It's got a 6.35mm headphone jack. I had a Bayer Dynamic 990 DT lying around, plugged those in, sounded amazing. I am not a headphone guy, so I should add that, but for me, it did as well as I was expecting it to. On the usability front, setup straightforward. It's got a nice front panel. You can pick between the VU meter or the equalizer, so that's fairly cool. The inclusion of the subwoofer outs means you can add subs fairly easily if you need that low-end grunt, as well as that pre-out to hook up dedicated power supply. So I would say on the pro front, I would say great power delivery, proper audiophile amplifier for people who have great speakers and sort of great source inputs. On the negative front, if I really had to be a stickler, it would be the lack of the moving coil phono stage, as well as the lack of high-end streaming, as in Wi-Fi streaming, as opposed to just Bluetooth. However, I do sort of understand why this would happen. I think the assumption obviously is that guys investing in this level of component at this price point are most likely going to have lying around a dedicated DAC as well as a dedicated phono, depending on which way they consume their music. So it's final thoughts time. Before I get into that, let me just talk about the price point. This is going to retail for just under 7 lakhs. So this is once again a big investment. I am going to bifurcate my thoughts into 2 sections. One is if you are looking up to set up a 2-channel system and you want sort of high quality sound, but don't necessarily want to add a bunch of external components, this is the way to go. It blew the Marantz 40N out of the water. The 40N is no slouch of an amp, retails for somewhere around 3-ish in the current day market. I also love that amp. So for me to say that this amp blew that out of the water is obviously a big statement from me. The second type of consumer is the consumer that has already invested in the high-end sort of streamer DAC, has already invested in the high-end turntable phono. For that consumer, I don't really think that sort of this makes a whole lot of sense, because you're probably better off investing in a high-end pre and power. Things just in general or products we should be reviewing. And as always, again, I look forward to hearing from you guys very, very soon.